Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a very special webinar today. This is always one of the first ones we do in a new year, and it's very exciting. So we're kicking off the 2024 All Iowa Reads season with a very special presentation from each of our three authors today. So Janae, I'm going to let you take us through these opening slides here, and then we're very excited to hear from, up first, Diane Wilson here in just a few minutes.
Thank you, Sam, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 2024 All Iowa Reads author webinar. My name is Janae Jackson-Doring. I'm the Youth Services Consultant for the State Library of Iowa and the Mistress of Ceremonies, as my colleague Helen likes to say. And with me is also my wonderful colleague, Helen Dagley, the Adult Librarian for the State Library of Iowa. So let's get started. So our schedule for today, Helen is going to introduce the All Iowa Reads program and what that program entails. We will hear from the adult All Iowa Reads winner, Diane Wilson, author of The Seed Keeper. We will then hear from Samira Ahmed, the author of Hollow Fires, who is the teen All Iowa Reads winner, and Celia C. Pérez, the children's author of Tumble and our children's All Iowa Reads winner. And then we'll have some closing remarks. And I will turn this over to Helen.
Good morning, everyone. Again, welcome. I am Helen Dagley from the State Library, also the chair of the Adult All Iowa Reads Committee. So first of all, for any of you who are unfamiliar with All Iowa Reads, I'll give you a brief overview. It is still remains one of the oldest or long-standingest programs from the State Library, but also one of the most successful. And it was established in 2002 for the purpose of fostering a sense of unity through reading. Iowans are encouraged to come together in their communities to read and talk about a single book in the same calendar year. So All Iowa Reads, as Janae has said, consists of 3 programs, each one with a chosen author per year. So for the adults and the teens and the kids, we have the 3 authors, and libraries and book clubs, schools, and other local organizations are encouraged to sponsor discussions of the titles. So moving right along from that, I'll give you a brief synopsis of The Seed Keeper. Many of you will have read the book ahead of time, but plenty of you will not have read it yet. So for all of you, here is the brief synopsis. The Seed Keeper is the story of a bold, strong Dakota woman named Rosalie Ironwing. As much as this is Rosalie's story of her past, her separation from her family, and her marriage to a white man, it is also the story of seeds, land, and connection to a place. It's my great pleasure this morning to introduce the adult Iowa author, Diane Wilson, who is speaking to us, I believe, from Minnesota this morning. And Diane is I hope I can pronounce this correctly. Diane, forgive me if I don't. Midahawaktan, which means dwellers of the Spirit Lake, descendant, enrolled on the Rosebud Reservation, Dakota. She is a writer and educator who has published award-winning books as well as essays in numerous publications. Wilson has received a Bush Foundation Fellowship, as well as awards from the Minnesota State Arts Board, the Jerome Foundation, and the East Central Regional Arts Council. She is the former executive director for Dream of Wild Health, an indigenous nonprofit farm, and the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance. It's a national coalition of tribes and organizations to create sovereign food systems for Native people. And she lives in Schaefer, Minnesota. And cold as it is today in Des Moines and elsewhere in Iowa, I'm guessing that it's a little bit colder even where Diane is talking from this morning. So without further ado, I'm just going to mute my camera and mute my mic and turn everything over to Diane with a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Hamatakiapi. Diane Wilson, Namakiapia, Bede Wakantuan Oyate Hamatahaya, Sichangu Oyate Edomawapia. So hello, all my relatives. My name's Diane Wilson. I am a descendant of the Bede Wakantuan Oyate, the Dakota people in Minnesota. And thank you, Helen, for your best effort there. And also I'm enrolled on the Rosebud Reservation. And yes, it is cold here in Minnesota, but you know, it's kind of cold everywhere in the Midwest. So let's hope it doesn't last too much longer. And I want to say, first of all, that I would like to express my gratitude for the invitation to be a virtual guest on the ancestral homelands of the Indigenous peoples of Iowa. And then I have to say what an honor it is to have my novel selected for the All Iowa Reads program. I'd like to thank Helen and Samantha and all the staff at the Iowa State Library and everyone else who has supported this program. And I would especially like to acknowledge all of you librarians who are doing such important work to protect access to diverse books and stories. To me, you are some of the heroes who are working today to make sure that we have a very robust literature and to support literacy. And finally, I just want to thank all of you for coming today and sharing your time with me. So I am going to share my screen now and I've got a little PowerPoint that talks about writing the book and then a little more about the book itself, and then a few program ideas as well. Let's see. Bear with me. There we go. Okay, so I always like to introduce myself as a gardener and a writer, and that means that I take care of seeds and stories. And as Helen mentioned, I'm also the former executive director for 2 Native organizations who are doing food sovereignty work across the country. And so all of this experience over many years has gone into the writing of The Seed Keeper. So I actually began working on this novel back in the year 2000 when I was also writing a memoir about my mother's family. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and my Lakota mother grew up in South Dakota and spent 6 years at the Holy Rosary Mission School on the Pine Ridge Reservation. But no one in my family knew about the history of boarding schools or the devastating impact that they've had on generations of Native families. I learned this history as an adult while writing my first book, the memoir Spirit Car: Journey to a Dakota Past, that traced back 5 generations in my mother's family to show how boarding schools and other assimilation programs have worked across generations. And while I was working on the memoir, I heard about a collection of old, rare tribal seeds that were being grown out by Dream of Wild Health. And at that time, they were just a tiny native-led farm in Minnesota. And as a gardener, I knew immediately that I needed to work with these seeds. And as a writer, I was fascinated by the powerful stories these seeds were carrying, such as the Cherokee Trail of Tears corn, Hopi black turtle beans, and traditional tobacco that was hundreds of years old. And these seeds carried stories of the seasons, of the ancestors who grew them, and the ancient wisdom of the mother plant herself. But what I didn't know then was the long history these seeds carried, how close they had come to extinction, nor the important role that was played by Native women who had ensured their survival despite immense challenges. And in 2008, I began working for Dream of Wild Health. And to me, that's when my real education began. I was learning an ancient indigenous relationship with seeds that I needed to understand before I could write this novel. I was blessed to work with Native elders, farmers, youth and their families, and the seeds themselves. We learned to pray before we planted and harvested. We also learned the teaching of reciprocity, that when we take care of our seeds, they also take care of us. And most important, we learned that when we garden with reverence, then our food truly becomes our medicine. We also learned some of the hard history around our indigenous foods. Through nearly 400 treaties, tribes across the country were dispossessed of land they had lived on for thousands of years. After their traditional foodways of hunting, gathering, and cultivating some indigenous seeds, tribes were moved onto reservations and received commodity foods that were high in starch and fat, undermining the traditional foods that were central to indigenous culture. As tribes became dependent on government rations, passing on traditional food knowledge and practices became more and more difficult as fewer families continued to garden. The seeds that had helped sustain Native families for many generations began to disappear. Today, the work of organizations like Dream of Wild Health is to help restore our indigenous seeds and food sovereignty to Native communities. When Arapaho elder Ernie Whiteman said to me, "If you can control the food, you can control the people," I realized that I could tell the history of Dakota people through the story of our food. And that's when I began writing The Seed Keeper. Excuse me. So in many ways, writing this book is my way to reclaim the story of our ancient relationship with seeds, to give back to the people who have shared so much with me, and to help carry this work forward for future generations. And as a writer, I feel a responsibility to uplift stories that have been silenced, that show our true history, as well as the courage, strength, and brilliance of our communities. One of those silent stories is at the heart of this book, a true story I first heard back in 2002 when I participated in the Dakota Commemorative March to honor the 1,700 Dakota women, children, and elders who were imprisoned at Fort Snelling before being forcibly removed from Minnesota after the 1862 Dakota War. Because they had no idea where they were being sent or how they would feed their families, they sowed their seeds into the hems of their skirts and hid them in their pockets. Even when families were starving, these women protected their seeds for the coming season and for future generations. Thanks to their courage and sacrifice, we still have Dakota corn to grow today. These women offered a profound lesson about protecting our seeds. The challenges today are very different, but our responsibility remains the same. So the story is told through the voices of 4 Dakota women across several generations from 1862 to 2002. The seeds open the book with a poem that reminds us of our original agreement to take care of them in exchange for the gift of food. And the main character is Rosalie Ironwing, and her family has gone to the furthest edge of assimilation without being completely absorbed into mainstream society. She doesn't speak her language, and she has very little connection to her community. The story begins as Rosalie is about to leave the farm where she's lived for 22 years to return to her childhood home on a Dakota reservation. After her father died when she was 12, she grew up in foster care, believing that she had no family. Rosalie had no connection at all to seeds. And when she marries a white farmer and learns to garden, that's when Rosalie begins the journey that will ultimately reconnect her to her family, their legacy of seeds, and her community. And I'm going to read a brief excerpt from the book. And this is set in 2002 when, excuse me, Rosalie is meeting her great aunt, Darlene Kilsdeer, for the first time. And she, her adult son, Thomas, is with her. And I do tell you right up front in the novel that she does find her one remaining relative. So much of the book is about that journey of of moving from her childhood home to finally discovering her family and her community. So this is Rosalie telling the story of meeting her great aunt, Darlene Kilsdeer, for the first time. Darlene's voice faded until it was little more than a whisper. The loud tick of the clock on the kitchen wall was the only sound in the room. My eyes were closed, and when I opened them, I saw Thomas holding his head in his hands. Darlene's face was drawn and tired. Her thin shoulders slumped forward. The nurse appeared and said, "Miss Darlene, you've worn yourself right out." Taking my great aunt's elbow, she helped Darlene stand up on shaky legs and make her slow way from the dining room table back to the recliner in the living room. Thomas and I followed. The nurse placed the oxygen tube beneath Darlene's nose, hooked plastic behind her ears, and held out a white pill. Darlene took several deep breaths. Then she sat up, pushed the pill away, and pulled the tube from her face. "I'm not done yet," Darlene said. "There's one more story she needs to know. You really need to take this. I don't have time." With a sigh, she looked first at Thomas and then at me. "We're a mess," she said, "a broken down mess, and we're all that's left. Don't go wasting time feeling sorry for yourself. Plenty of people have had a rough life. You just make the best of it. That's all anyone can do. The two of you still have time to do better. It's up to you." Pointing to the scrawny corn growing in buckets of hard-packed soil, she said, "That's the best I could do. Hauled those buckets myself with no help from anybody. All the people downstairs said, 'You can't do it.' I said, 'You have no idea.' Rosalie, I didn't expect to see you again. I didn't think anyone but me would ever care about these seeds. I thought they'd die with me. But there you sit, my great niece, my last relative. You have the truth and more to take home with you. Nurse, I need my basket, please." Excuse me. We waited in silence for the nurse to return and lay a large hand-woven basket on Darlene's lap. She smiled as her arthritic fingers ran slowly across the rough willow exterior. Reaching inside, she carefully pulled out a piece of deer antler and several small sacks, each one tied closed with a red string. Opening one bag, she shook a few corn kernels into her palm and handed them to me, tiny jewels of lavender blue, rose, and cream. That's Dakota corn, Wamanaheza, a gift from my great-grandmother, Mahpia Maza, to Marie, and then to my mother, Suzanne. I don't think it's been grown since the summer my sister Lorraine was taken away to boarding school. Every fall, we dried most of the corn in braids that hung in a dark corner of the cabin, not too near the fire. We hung baskets filled with seeds and beans, another with strips of dried squash. The willow basket was supposed to go to Lorraine, and she knew I was lying when I said it was lost. She hated me for keeping these seeds from her. They were her birthright, the only thing left from her old life. But when she came back, everything she touched withered and died. My brothers, her daughter. I couldn't let her have the seeds. Deep down, I think she knew it too. To this day, I don't know if I did right. Maybe they would have helped her find her way back. I couldn't risk it. The old ones told Suzanne that a time was coming when the seeds would go into hiding. They said that people would no longer respect them or the land or the water, that the seeds would leave, some returning to the soil, others simply waiting in darkness. They told her to be ready. Just before she died, my mother gave me the basket. She knew that Lorraine was not coming back, not the girl we had known and loved. The spirit of the schools was too strong, she said, too hungry, and it would not ever let them go. Rosalie, I'm giving you this basket. Find a safe place to grow the seeds. I don't know what else to tell you. Love them like your children, the way you love your son. Darlene turned to Thomas. Come closer, Takoja. Let me look at you. You have your grandfather's face. I'm going to give you this. From the basket, she withdrew a small object and carefully unwrapped it, revealing a perfectly preserved cob of corn that had faded to a dull, lifeless red. She placed the cob in Thomas's hand and closed his fingers gently around it. This corn has been in our family for many, many generations. It came with the antler so that we would always remember. Take it, Takoja. Maybe it will help you remember. So throughout the book, the story moves around in time, alternating between the main character, Rosalie Ironwing, and the voices of her best friend, Gabby Makepeace, who overcomes a difficult childhood to become a lawyer working to protect the river. We also meet her great aunt, Darlene Killsdeer, whom we just heard from, and she cares for their family seeds and spends much of her life searching for Rosalie. And we also meet Marie Blackbird, and she is Rosalie's great-great-grandmother, who was 14 during the 1862 Dakota War. And she carries some of the hard history in this story, from the removal after the war to the boarding schools. And as we're following the lives of these women, we're also following the story of the seeds until one day they disappear. So the question that I ask throughout the book is about the ways in which our relationship with seeds has changed over many generations and what that change means for us as human beings and for the seeds themselves. And ultimately, The Seed Keeper is a story about protecting what we love, remembering our history, and celebrating the gifts we've received from our ancestors and the earth. And my hope is that this book will help us remember that even small efforts like reclaiming our relationship with seeds and planting a garden can help create the world we live in and envision for our families and our communities. And when we do this work, then we're reclaiming a healthy, sustainable relationship with the land that starts in our own backyards. We're remembering our food, not as a commodity, but as medicine. So before I share with you a few program ideas that I've seen in communities around the state, other states, I would also like to share this one paragraph from another section of the book, also spoken by Rosalie. And this is when she is first starting to learn how to garden. And this paragraph pretty much sums up how I think and care for seeds. So this is spoken in Rosalie's voice. Everywhere I looked, I saw how seeds were holding the world together. They planted forests, covered meadows with wildflowers, sprouted in the cracks of sidewalks, or lay dormant until the long-awaited moment came, signaled by fire or rain or warmth. They filled the produce aisle in grocery stores. Seeds breathed and spoke in a language all their own. Each one was a miniature time capsule, capturing years of stories in its tender flesh. How ignorant I felt compared to the brilliance contained in a single seed. I had begun to see that when we save these seeds, when we select which ones will be planted again, our lives become braided into the life stories of these plants. So hopefully that gives you just a little sense for what the book is about and why I cared so much to write this book. It has been a true labor of love, both writing it and in the conversations that I've gotten to have in different communities. So I wanted to share just some of the ideas that have that I've seen in other communities, mostly libraries doing community reads, and just how creative they've gotten in celebrating our seeds, our foods, our community life together. So of course, book clubs and discussion groups are a great way to talk about these stories. Seed libraries are another really fun program, and I did hear from Samantha that a number of libraries already have them in place. So congratulations to all of you who are doing that good work. Starting or supporting a community garden and offering both seed planting, garden planting, and seed keeping workshops is a fun way to connect to the book. There's also a lot of great programs for working with youth around seeds and gardens. And one of them is making a seed necklace that they keep around that they wear actually for close to a week. And then the seed inside that necklace actually sprouts. There's also art making activities for youth. It's a great way to get them interested and connected to doing food, seed, and garden work, as well as cultural work at a young age. I also think, excuse me, this is such a great opportunity to connect to the Native communities in your area and invite them to maybe collaborate on programs. So I know that in Iowa, the Meskwaki Food Sovereignty Initiative has done great work. I had some contact with them back when I was at Dream of Wild Health, and maybe there's opportunities to do cooking workshops or seed keeping workshops or history and culture talks, beading talks. Seeds and beading are closely connected in Native language. And I do just want to say too that on the cover of the book, this is original beadwork that was created by the artist, Lakota artist Holly Young. So that's her interpretation of the book. A community down in the Southwest had a silent auction of artwork that they all created, and they used that to raise money for a local indigenous museum. So they supported that nonprofit through their silent auction. And then another community it was the visual artists, and this was a program they did every year around their community read book, where they would each create artwork that was inspired by something in that book. And then they would have an art exhibit, and then that exhibit would travel around the state. So that's just some of the wonderful programs that I've gotten to see in my travels. And I can't tell you how much joy I get out of seeing the creativity that people bring to this work. So, and I'm happy to talk about any of those in more detail. And then I just wanted to share with you, these are the books that I have written, and that's my contact, actually my website. So there is a way to connect with me through email on that website. So it tells you a little bit more about my other work. So that's if I think at this point, if I'm correct, we open up to questions.
This is Helen again. It looked like we got a question through chat. In what ways has your family's history and heritage mirrored or intersected with Rosalie's?
So Rosalie's history is different from mine. I grew up in Minneapolis, one of 5 kids, and my mother was Lakota, my dad was Swedish. So Rosalie's history was very different, but it had a lot in common with people that I met and talked with in in my community. And so I wanted to show some of the challenges that Native people are facing, from foster families to our foods and our health issues. And what I learned through the organizations that I was working with was how powerful returning to our indigenous foods is in terms of doing healing work. So I gave Rosalie some of my understanding that she gains through the book, where she goes from not gardening at all to then becoming a seed keeper for her family's seeds. And so I shared my understanding. There are parts of her that remind me of my mother, of the kind of person she was. So definitely influenced by my family, but not autobiographical. I try to avoid that.
So thank you. It looks like we got another question. So, well, what would you say if someone not interested in food asks you, why would I read this book?
Oh, that's a great question. It's not, I wouldn't call this a food novel. Or a gardening novel. It's more a novel about how we understand who we are and how we can make choices that can actually transform that identity, how we can overcome trauma, how we can embrace work that we are meant to do. So it is very much a character-driven novel about Rosalie's transformation. It's very much about the legacy that our families carry for us, and and this kind of comes out of my, having written a memoir too, how our lives are shaped by the ancestors who preceded us. And if we don't know that history, if we don't know where we come from, then we're kind of flying blind in a way to the legacy that we're carrying. So this is very much a book about kind of finding yourself through your family and the work that you're meant to be doing. It's also very much a novel about reconnecting with all of our relatives around us. So it's exploring that relationship that say the one character, Marie Blackbird, how women had with plants and seeds and food back just what is that, 160-ish years ago, the traditional way that we all related to the land around us, and then how that has evolved. And so it's a way of asking that question about our relationship with plants and animals and seeds. And is this where we want to be? Is this are these the choices that we want to continue to make? So that's my long answer too. It's very much about these characters and how they how they transform and face the challenges in their life.
Thank you, Diane. Well, as you were talking, it's giving rise to a number of questions from other sources in our chat here. So I'm just going to go question by question, whether they relate to what you just said or not. Yes. It's just the order in which they came. Okay. Which historic seed, oh, this is interesting. Which historic seed gave you the most joy when you were able to see it bloom?
Oh, I love that question. So the corn that I was talking about, that I wrote about in that little excerpt that I read, the Dakota corn, that actually came back to Dream of Wild Health. And then I was honored to be able to grow that corn in my own garden. So I don't think you can see it behind me, but there is a small cob that I keep right on my bookshelf, just as a reminder that this is not, I mean, this is literature, but it is also a real life experience to me. And so sometimes when I'm doing longer talks, I love to share the story of corn, because that's a plant that transformed Native communities and then went on to really transform all of our communities, especially those of us here in the Midwest. Both Minnesota and Iowa are corn states. So so I love this corn, and to be able to grow it and to think about how our relationship with that plant goes back 9,000 years. And that, that plant was instrumental for helping communities survive when there wasn't enough game. So this corn to me just has my heart.
Thank you. That's a beautiful answer. I love it. Thank you. So a slightly different question. How would you describe your research process for this book?
Well, I would say if you think of the book as the tip of the iceberg, then below it is that immense amount of research and pre-writing and gathering that you do so that you can create a real world in a novel. And so part of it was my experience working with Native organizations. Part of it was my experience as a gardener. And for all of you gardeners out there, the struggles we go through every summer. And then part of it was just deep research to understand more about conventional farming, and then the evolution of farming as well, from subsistence farmers who were taking care of their families and taking care of their land, to what happened, after World War II, and then what has happened to farming today. So I really wanted to show farmers too as being under immense pressure in the way that farming has evolved into a very big corporate ag enterprise in many ways. So I have a lot of empathy for what the struggles of farmers as well. So huge amount of research goes into books like this.
Thank you. This is interesting too. I feel like this might be a wonderful book to connect with different generations and talking about exposing history family stories to younger people. Do you see it as a work that connects that way?
Oh, that's my dream, is that it connects across generations. That, you know, we all start to see how important it is to know who we are and to make sure that we are passing our knowledge as elders, because that's my role now, to make sure I'm passing knowledge on to younger generations. So one of my favorite groups to work with are high school and college age young people, to help them see the exciting possibilities and learning more about gardening and their food and their family histories, and and then to see them go into these fields like there's environmental studies and other kinds of work that they can do as adults. So I very much see this as an intergenerational story. So thank you for asking that.
Thank you. What kinds of response to the book have you received from people with Indigenous heritage?
Really, really supportive. This is because of the work that I've done over the past couple decades in working with Native communities, Native organizations, then they know that the work comes from a very authentic place. And so that has been part of my joy as well, getting to talk to different Native communities and writers who are also committed to telling stories from their people. So I have really enjoyed the conversations that I get to do with both Native communities and non-Native communities, because to me, this is work. This rebuilding of our relationship with the land is work that really brings us all together. And so I'm deeply committed to doing that work with communities of different backgrounds.
Thank you. This is just an aside comment. So we have somewhere in Decorah, Iowa, that is well known to those of us in this state. It's called Seed Savers. Have you heard of Seed Savers? They do, heritage seed.
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
I love them. In fact, so you'll notice there's a very long afterword in the book, and I mentioned Seed Savers because I used to work with them when I was at Dream of Wild House, but I'm a huge supporter of the work they do. And, Decorah is a really cool town. So yes, that's where I tell people to go. It's a great place to find seeds that are heirloom seeds, which is what I hope people will plant.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I have a question from me, namely, what's next? What are you working on for your next book?
So I'm working on a book of essays that continues these themes around relationship with land, and also looks at the ways in which we carry not only our personal grief, but also a grief that we feel for the way the earth is changing. And then also a children's book that will take this story about seeds in, another direction.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything this morning. Much appreciated. Beautiful.
Thank you.
So on that note, I would be remiss if I didn't give a nod right now to the committee who actually chose Diane's books from so many other wonderful titles. You can see the slide up here. I'm just going to quick run down the list. We have Kayla Becker, Leslie Heinzler, Angie Johnson, Cameron Constable, Kathy Magruder, Jill Gray Martinez, Morris Strickler, and Kate Young. And on that note, I think we've come to a point in the program where I can turn things over to Janae once more, and she will come in here and talk to you and introduce the the teen committee, and Samira Ahmed. So over to you, Janae.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, Diane. Thank you, Diane, and thank you to the adult committee. Well, I have the wonderful pleasure of introducing the Teen All Iowa Reads Committee. I met virtually with the committee, and they did a wonderful job in having thorough, very thoughtful discussions on the books that they read and choosing a winner. So I have the lovely pleasure of introducing Dr. Ambry Reefer, Angie Shear, Bailey Kaming-Gierke, Erin Coughlin, and Lauren Roberts. They're from the, Ambry's from the Hudson Public Library, Angie's from Manchester Public Library, Bailey is from Carnegie Stout Public Library, Erin is from Nevada Public Library, and Lauren Roberts is from Oxford Public Library. Hopefully you can give them an applause in the chat, but they did a fantastic job. I cannot speak highly of both of my committees, and I'm very, very pleased to be working with them. So thank you, Teen All Iowa Reads Committee. And on that note, we have our winner for the Teen All Iowa Reads from the Teen All Iowa Reads Committee, and it is Samira Ahmed. And I'm just going to read a little bit about Samira. Samira Ahmed is the best-selling author of Love, Hate, and Other Filters, Internment, Mad, Bad, and Dangerous to Know, Hollow Fires, and the Amira and Hamanza middle grade duology, as well as a Ms. Marvel comic book miniseries. Her poetry, essays, and short stories have appeared in numerous publications and anthologies, including the New York Times, Take the Mic, Color Outside the Lines, Vampires Never Get Old, and A Universe of Wishes. Samira lives in New York City. And to keep things on time, I am going to turn this over to Samira. Welcome and thank you.
Hi, Janae. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just doing a quick mic check. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much for having me today. Just one tiny correction. I actually live in Chicago.
Oh, my goodness.
I used to live in New York City, but I am actually a Midwesterner, and I grew up in the suburbs, and I live in Chicago. So I am just thrilled to be here, and I just want to start by saying thank you so much, Janae, and to all the members of the committee who selected Hollow Fires for the All Iowa Teen Reads, and to all the librarians who are here today. I know that we are in difficult times for libraries and the freedom to read right now, so this is especially meaningful to me. And it's actually just uplifting to me also to be chosen, and it feels so nourishing, especially just yesterday I found out that I was supposed to be in Iowa later this year for a public library event, and for a school visit they were going to be reading my novel Internment. 1,000 kids in the school were supposed to be reading it, and I was going to do a public event at a library, and now it looks like there have been objections raised to my presence there because it looks like some district and community members are worried about reading Internment so close to the election or in an election year. So it's been quite an interesting experience for me because I have been canceled and banned, and to have Iowa select Hollow Fires is just, it's very meaningful to me. So sorry to go on extensively about that, but I just wanted to share how important this is just for me, and I'm totally honored. And I know just from my friends how hard it must be for librarians right now and the things that you must be facing. And I was, when I was at University of Chicago, I was a work study kid, and I worked in the special collections at the University of Chicago Library. So I have a tiny bit of library experience, but libraries also shaped who I am, because I was an immigrant kid growing up in this small town, Batavia, Illinois. We were the first Indian family to live in Batavia, the very first. And, there weren't a lot of titles on shelves by authors that looked like me or characters that were like me or mirrored my experience, but going to the library was a home. And so for me, these attacks on the freedom to read and attacks on librarians are personal, not just in the sense that I'm being banned, but in the sense that I feel like one of my homes is being attacked. So I am with you in spirit, and I wish I could be with every librarian who needs like a little boost. So I'm sending out a lot of love to you guys today. In any case, I will stop talking about that. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Hollow Fires and kind of a little bit of my inspiration behind it. And if you would bear with me, I'd love to read just a little bit because that kind of goes into, it will speak to the questions I asked as I was approaching this novel. I always say that when I begin writing a book, that my novels all begin with three things: a character, a conflict, and a question. And when I say begin with that, I mean that those are sort of the seeds from which the world of the novel grows for me. So a character, a conflict, and a question. They don't always come in that order. And sometimes, as with Hollow Fires, there are many questions. So I'm going to just read the very beginning of the novel, and then I'm going to talk about how some of those questions that were sort of swirling around in my mind created this story and these characters. So this is just the very beginning. Hollow Fires is actually a dual POV novel. It is a story about a crime, a murder, and the dual POV is of Sophia, the young woman, the teenager and budding journalist who wants to figure out what happened to this missing boy, Jawed. And the second POV is Jawad's voice as a ghost. So this is just a little bit of the start of Sophia's story. Sophia. Fact: the dead can't speak. Truth: sometimes the dead whisper to you in the quiet. Don't let them forget I was here once. Alive, young, I was like you. I believed I would live forever. You never forget the first time you see a dead body. It was warmish for Chicago winter, if the temperature hovering around freezing is warm. In Chicago, it is. There was a sickly sweet rotting smell of leaves that had fallen from trees, mixing with mud, never totally drying up before the first snow. The odor filled the air around the sloping embankments of a crumbling stone culvert that was lined with steel. The pipe was hidden by overgrown limp grass, deep in Jackson Park, in the part where no one ever goes because there are stories of ghosts and Mothman sightings. It's not the restored part of the park, the blooming Japanese garden, the shiny metal sculpture of giant petals, the bike paths, and the Illinois prairie popping with blue cornflowers. It's the neglected area by the abandoned arched bridge that leads to nowhere. No one ever went there because there was absolutely nothing to see until the time there was. The first thing I saw was a shoe. So I just wanted to read that first part to you because one of the things that I wanted to incorporate in this novel was these notions of fact and truth and alternative facts. Because like I said, my novels always begin with a conflict, a character, and a question. And I had many questions as I was sort of formulating the idea for this novel. And a lot of those were derived from my listening to true crime podcasts. I'm sure there are some other true crime podcast listeners out there. I also happen to read thrillers. And as I was listening to a lot of true crime podcasts, there were a number of questions that were kind of swirling in my head. And the first question was, whose stories are told? Like in these podcasts, whose story is actually being told? What are the crimes that are being chosen to investigate? Is there a reason that some murders seem to attract us, that compel us to want to solve them, while so many others are left in the wayside? What are the ethics of true crime? That to me is a very fascinating question. And I write for teens, and as a former high school English teacher, I actually think that these questions are especially interesting to teens because young people are so much smarter than adults ever give them credit for. And they're also developing their politics, like small p and big P, meaning they are creating their own world. They are absorbing so much information, and they have so many questions. And that's one of the things I loved about being a high school teacher, was investigating some of these deeper questions, like this question: what are the ethics of true crime? And in talking to teens about Hollow Fires, I mean, a lot of kids listen to true crime podcasts. A lot of kids are familiar with the Dahmer movie, or some of those true crime docuseries, and they do understand that there are ethical and moral questions that arise when we report on crimes in this way. And they also understand that, number one, not every crime gets solved. In fact, many, many murders, nearly half or more, don't get solved. They understand that most of the murders that aren't getting solved are murders of Black and brown people, because Black and brown bodies seem to not have the media attention or the value that white bodies do. I mean, and we can see this in this rash of missing Indigenous women in both the United States and Canada. We can see this in the murders of Black trans women that are left unsolved. In Chicago, I know that the crimes that get attention tend to be crimes committed against white and wealthier residents, as opposed to Black and brown people, or people in poverty. So those were all questions that were in my mind. And we were also living in this kind of almost surreal time where we were being told that alternative facts exist. And in a world where alternative facts exist, what is the truth? How can you discern truth when someone says to you, this is an alternative fact to the very fact that you are seeing in front of your eyes? So those were just some of the many questions that I was thinking about as I wrote Hollow Fires. And Hollow Fires is loosely based on 3 true crimes. One is a historical crime. And I'm not going to say what those 3 are quite yet, because I think not everyone's read it. So I don't want to give spoilers, because I think if I give those, it will tell a little bit too much. But I do speak about it in an author note at the end. And there's nothing about this novel that's supposed to shame us for listening to true crime or reading about it. I'm also fascinated by it. But as I listened to true crime, I was thinking about how much we never get to hear the victim story. One question that I ask young people when I go to speak at schools is just the simple one, which is, can anyone name a serial killer? And of course, every kid can, because the Dahmer movie just came out, and the vast majority of the kids raised their hand and said his name. And if you go even back a generation or two to my generation, of course, everyone knows John Wayne Gacy. The Helter Skelter murders. We can all name murderers, and then when I ask them to name the victims of any of these true crimes, a lot fewer hands go up, if any at all, because those are the names we don't remember. Those are the stories that aren't really getting told. And when we essentially are absorbing these true crime stories almost as entertainment, that really raises this question of what does that mean about us, the reader, the viewer, the listener? And why are
Samira, we can't hear you. It looks like your mic went out.
I'm having that issue as well, Janae. Let's see what we can do here. Just a moment, and we'll try and get her back. Samira, we've lost your mic.
Oh no.
There, you're back.
Sorry.
Okay.
Am I back?
You're
Yes,
back.
you're
I'm so
back.
sorry.
No,
I don't
I thought
know.
it was me. I clicked away from the Zoom for 1 second and your audio disappeared. I thought, what have I done? All right, but you're back.
It could be, you know what? I'm gonna remove my iPods because maybe it's a technical issue with that, and I don't want that to happen again.
Okay. Let's
Okay,
try
just
it.
one moment. I'm so sorry, everyone.
No, you're fine. You were on
Happens
the
to the
point.
best of us.
You were on the point where you were mentioning about true crime and how we see it as entertainment, and what does that really mean to us?
Yes. Okay. So when we are consuming true crime essentially as entertainment, what does that say about us? What does it mean that we as a viewer or reader or listener should be doing? And why don't we know more about the victims of the crime? And are the stories that we're hearing, like when we see these podcasts investigating crimes, is there any, do we even consider if like the families, are being re-traumatized in a way? And again, I'm not trying to shame us or judge us for listening to them. I mean, I listened to them too. That's what inspired this book. But I do think that when we witness, or when we're bearing witness to this, it's important for us to ask questions. And one of the reasons I wrote Hall of Fires was to ask that question and to start a dialogue, because I believe every novel is a dialogue between the reader and the writer, and between one reader and another reader, even if we're not in the same room. And so for this novel, I followed the story of Jawed, who is a young boy, a child of Iraqi refugees, who initially goes missing and then later is found murdered. And Sophia and some of her friends, this is happening in their town. It's happening in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago. And it's close to Sophia because they're both Muslim, and she has maybe sort of passed in the same circles as this young boy. And her question is, after the first few days where this young boy goes missing, the attention seems to stop. The police aren't paying attention to this crime in the way she wants them to. The media certainly isn't. And she believes that Jawed deserves to be found. She believes that his story deserves to be told. She believes that his crime ought to be answered for. And so that's how I kind of came to this novel. And I also, because I'm writing for teens, and I see sort of the influence when we're talking about podcasts and social media and our phones, and we see the influence of how algorithms work, and how young people in this country are being unwittingly recruited often for essentially into white supremacist websites via algorithms on YouTube. I wanted to also address that issue, because it's pretty pervasive. And I think as adults, we don't realize how easy it is to like go into YouTube and watch a video about Minecraft and then suddenly be pulled in and drawn into one video after another. And how white supremacist organizations are actually using those algorithms to spread this like, vile message. And I did a lot of research about how young people are being influenced by that kind of thing, and what we as adults and parents can do. And so I tried to incorporate that into the novel as well. So I think I've gone over my time to speak. I'm not quite sure, but I wanted to make sure that there was time for questions. I apologize. As you can probably tell, I love talking. So I can talk endlessly, but I want to make sure I can answer any questions you might have as well.
No, you are totally fine.
Okay.
This is amazing, and because we have till 11:20.
Okay, great.
While people are entering items into the chat for their questions, I just had a few questions. I was listening to a couple of interviews, and you really love to talk about the craft of writing. Can you talk about your process and just why you love the craft of writing?
Sure. So I have not always been a writer. I mean, I was first, I came to novel writing sort of late, actually. I was a high school English teacher, and I worked in New York City education nonprofits, but I always kind of wrote on the side just for fun. And then like about 12 years ago, I sort of got this idea in my head that kind of stuck there. And I was like, I wonder if this could be a novel. And so because I was an English teacher and because I always used to write on the side, I was also fascinated by process. Like I love hearing other writers talk about how they write. And so when I first started writing Love, Hate, and Other Filters, I wasn't really sure how to write a book. And there's a million ways out there. There's like the snowflake method, and there's like all these outlines and examples and stuff that people do, and nothing was quite working for me. But one thing that I knew that I was pretty good at was short form writing. And so I took this idea of Love, Hate, and Other Filters and wrote a short story based on the idea in my head. And I essentially called it my treatment. And that's what I do now for so many of my novels. If I get that seed of an idea and those seeds, the character, conflict, and question that are my three approaches or my inroads into the novel, I try to flush it out with some notes, and then I try to write this treatment. And it's just a short story. It's not a story that I'm going to refine and publish. Sometimes it finds its way into the novel, sometimes it doesn't. And it's not the entire arc of the novel, but rather it's a scene. It's with the characters that I think are going to be the main characters in the novel. And that essentially lets me see if I think the story has legs. So that's always like an early part of the process for me, because when you're writing a novel, you have to live with these characters for 1.5 years, 2 years. You're writing 60, 70, 80, 100,000 words.
Right.
You're going to read that story approximately 1 million times. And you want to make sure that you love it. And look, I'm not going to lie. There are some moments where I'm like, oh my God, I can't read my book one more time. I've read it too much. I'm sick of you guys, but I still have to love the story. And I have to believe from the beginning that the story has the legs to be a novel. And so that treatment is something that I just love doing, because it helps me, start to craft the voice of the main POV characters. It helps me understand what some of those conflicts are that will arise for that character. Because obviously there can't just be one conflict. We have, there's usually one big conflict, but stakes come into the novel through also like minor conflicts as well. So like for Sophia in this novel, obviously she wants to solve this crime, but then there's also issues of her parents. And, she's a teenager, so she also has regular teenage stuff going on. Like, who am I crushing on right now? Am I going to go to this dance? Am I going to get this homework done? Why is this one teacher being a jerk to me? Just all of those things too, which for young people, small stakes, what can feel like small stakes to us as adults are big stakes. Like figuring out if you're going to go to the dance or who you're going to go with, if you're going to go with anyone, that can be a big stake. So I wanted in that short treatment piece, some of those small stakes sort of come to the surface too. I want to try to start building out a few of the other characters that my main character is going to interact with. So that treatment piece is just my inroad into the novel. And I honestly love doing it, because sometimes I've written those and they aren't going to be a novel. And I don't know, in some ways I have like this isn't very scientific, but I have like a visceral response to it when I'm writing it. And so then I kind of just know, am I going to live with these characters? Am I going to love these characters? Is this actually a novel, or is this just a little story that's going to exist in my notebook and maybe I'm going to come back to it later? And so that's like the foundation of my books. And from there I can build, I build out the world, like even things that are not in the novel before I even start. For example, I build out my characters' high school class schedule. Most of that doesn't go into the novel because no one wants to read like, okay, from 7:10 to 8 o'clock, I'm in this, I'm in French class, but they are going from class to class. And I have to physically navigate that in the school space, but also the choices that they're making as to which classes they're taking, to me, speak to their character too. I know if they're doing extracurriculars, I am trying to figure out who their friends are, because I want those friends to be three-dimensional characters. And for my novels, I know it's not always popular in young adult, but I always have parents in my novels. I'm an immigrant kid, and parents play a large presence in your life, whether you want to or not. And I actually think that the parent-teen relationship creates so much natural drama in a story. So that's why I love having it. Like, a parent's job is to give their child everything they need to be independent in the world, right? And yet at the same time, as their child is growing more independent and wanting to pull away from them, the parents, I think, natural impulse is to like hold them close, like, no, you're my baby, don't go away yet. And I think that's such an interesting sort of tug of war. And that can create so much conflict and drama in life for both a teen and for a parent. So I try to like take notes on what those relationships are too. So that's just a little bit of my early craft work on building a novel.
I love it. That's a wonderful answer. Thank you. I appreciate it. Looks like Mark and Sarah Campbell, they said, as you researched and wrote, did you feel yourself doing more explaining or discovering about justice in our country?
Oh, that is an awesome question. I would say probably a little bit of both. I try not to have my books be explainy because nobody wants, like, I grew up in the time of like after school specials. I don't know if anyone, I'm like aging myself, but any other Gen Xers out there will know what I'm talking about. And those aren't appealing. Like where it's like, oh, Johnny smoked after school behind the bleachers and now he's, this terrible thing has happened to him. So don't be like him. Nobody wants those kinds of stories. So even when I sort of have to explain, I try to make it about discovery, because one of the other craft pieces that's important to me is curiosity, because I think curiosity leads my craft. And I think that curiosity is also so natural for young people. And so I try to have their curiosity be part of that discovery. And some of that discovery is just my own. Like when I said I was researching about how YouTube and some of these other algorithms lead kids into this rabbit hole towards like very deep misogyny, towards white supremacy. I mean, it is shocking to see how quickly you can go from literally like, how do I play this video game better? Or how can I do this, into these kind of sites. And there's been a pretty good number of a number of articles and fascinating research. And that was really eye-opening. I think because I'm living in this country as a brown person and as a Muslim, I was kind of aware of sort of the inequities in our justice system. And so that wasn't necessarily new to me, but it is still always astonishing to read about the crimes that do get solved and the ones that are virtually ignored. And I think even though we know about those inequities, I actually think it's important for us to keep that sense of like shock at how unfair the system is, or shock at, even though we know like, okay, this Black or brown body isn't as valuable as someone else. I think that I don't ever want to become like immune to that shock. And so in some ways there's that that jerk of discovery is always there, because I think when we become sort of like complacent about it, or like, yeah, it's another situation like this, is when we don't act to make change.
Thank you. Sandy, looks like she says, do you find that characters in those shorter sketches sometimes fit into stories you are working on maybe years later? Do they sort of come back and visit again in some way if they're visualized strongly enough, if they're strongly enough visualized in your head?
I'm trying to think if any of those characters have come back. They haven't yet, actually, I don't think. But I keep all of them. And sometimes I do sometimes go back to them. And, for Love, Hate, and Other Filters, and for Internment, well, actually also for Mad, Bad, and Dangerous to Know and Hall Fires, pieces of that treatment wound up in the novel. It's not just taken it wasn't like this became a chapter,
Mhm.
but different pieces became part of that. And actually for Hollow Fires, the story that I really wrote, it wasn't just Sophia's story because it's a dual POV. And actually Jawed's voice was, his voice as this victim, as a ghost, was the one that came to me first. So I had that story, and then I created Sophia as the frame. So Jawed's voice, in a way that I had written about in that treatment, inspired Sophia's voice.
Awesome. Thank you. Lauren, who's one of our teen All Ira Reads committee members, she says, why did you feel it was important to include Jawad's ghost perspective in Hollow Fires? That's a great question.
Yeah. I mean, it was a very hard POV to write because it was really sad. But as I was listening to all these true crime podcasts and things, I kept thinking, like, I wish that victim had a voice. I wish they could just tell me a little something about themselves. Yes, we can interview parents and neighbors and everyone else, but there must be such a terrifying sense of aloneness during those last moments. And I just wanted Jawed to be able to have someone that he could connect with. I wanted him, he was a kid who was essentially lost, but I wanted in the character Sophia for him to feel found. And I know we can't give that to the victims of real crimes. But I guess by putting that voice in here, it was a way for me to honor all those victims who don't get to have, their voice heard, or whose voice we can only hear through, through family and friends, through videos they've left, through their social media. But I don't know, Jawed was really, that was actually a tough POV to write, but I just really felt it was so important to have him there. And, I think it's like that's why I put that little piece at the very beginning of the book, which is, there is the way that those who have passed, stay with us. And I guess I wanted to give life to that idea.
Awesome. Thank you. Our final question comes, let's see, from Mark and Sarah. From your teaching experience and writing experience, what are your favorite reasons for being hopeful about the next generation of both born here kids and immigrant kids?
I love this question. I am like so in love with Gen Z because, and also Gen Alpha, they're the little babies who are coming up. But these young people, I mean, I have the incredible privilege of being able to, like you, talk to teens and get to visit them at schools. And they are they have an awareness, they have a knowledge, they have a vocabulary that we just didn't have, when I was younger. And what I really love about them is the ways in which they find, the ways in which they activate themselves and each other. Like, yes, I'm just talking right now about all the terrible things about, like, our phones and social media, but just like in Hollow Fires, the way the kids use social media to try to get justice, to give voice to this story, is something that was absolutely inspired by what young people are doing in real life. I think that I find this generation to be like so brave. I find them willing to march and speak out and do so in this very public way, because social media didn't exist for anyone's lifetime in the way it has existed for Gen Z. And I'm just like so proud of everything they do. But I also want to say that as adults, I don't want to just let us off the hook. Like, I don't, we're the ones who wrecked the earth. Like, these kids who were born 15 years ago, 20 years ago have not done it. We're the ones who built these systems of power that are so unjust. We are the ones who have, created these structures of white supremacy and misogyny and like all of these things. And I do not want adults to have this cop out of that it's only the young people who have to dismantle this. Janae, I think, or I actually can't, I just came in at the very end of like the last speaker, and they were talking about the elders and like what the job of the elders is. So I think of myself as an elder. I mean, I am technically an elder, but I believe that I have an ethical responsibility. I started talking to you guys today about the ethics of true crime. And I believe as both a writer and as an adult, I have an ethical and moral responsibility to our young people. And while they are incredibly inspiring to me in all the ways that they work, I hope that I can inspire them in some ways, but I also hope that I can lend some of my experience to them as well. So I don't know, like I said, novels are a dialogue, and I believe, all my novels are intergenerational, and I believe so much in the power of intergenerational dialogue. But I think, the older generations can't just speak, we have to listen. And I guess what I love is that Gen Z is always willing to tell me their opinion.
Yes, I love it. I love it. You have such exuberant energy, and I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today. Looks like our viewing audience, they're so happy to have you here with us today as well. I can't wait to read your next book. This book won't burn on May 7th. I'm excited to read it. But yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you, and I hope y'all staying warm out there.
Yeah, it's freezing here. Oh, thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. All right. So we are going to move now and switch gears to the Children's All Iowa Reads Committee. And before I do that, I just want to say thank you again to the Teen All Iowa Reads Committee. You guys did a fabulous job. I am so pleased and proud to work with each and every one of you. So thank you. And to our Children's All Iowa Reads Committee, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is the committee who also took the time to read through a lot of books, and they had such wonderful dialogue with discussing these books as well. And I'm going to introduce Brianna Glenn from DeSoto Public Library, Eleanor Galui in Grinnell College in Grinnell, Olivia Kaler from Kelowna Public Library, Sheila Olson from Johnston Public Library, and Ann Wilmoth of Iowa City Public Library. Please give them a wonderful round of applause in the chat if you're able to say thank you. They did a fantastic job. I know there's some committee members that are leaving the Kids All Iowa Reads Committee because it's their final year of serving, but I just want to say thank you so much. You guys taught me a lot my first year with All Iowa Reads, so thank you. And Sam, if you could go to the next slide. And now we have our Children's All Iowa Reads winner, Celia C. Pérez, and she is going to talk about her book, Tumble. But before she discusses her book, I just want to read a couple things. Celia C. Pérez is the author of the award-winning and critically acclaimed books, The First Rule of Punk, which came out in 2017, Strange Birds, A Field Guide to Ruffling Feathers in 2019, and Tumble, which was released in 2022. She lives in Chicago with her family, where in addition to writing books about lovable weirdos and outsiders, she works as a community college librarian. And also from her website, it says when she was in middle school, she filled diaries with recaps of televised wrestling matches. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Celia.
Thank you. Thanks, Janae. Hi, everyone. I want to start by thanking Janae and the All Iowa Reads Children's Committee for selecting Tumble as your 2024 book for kids. I'd also like to thank the State Library of Iowa for sponsoring All Iowa Reads, and everyone who's here today. Thank you for joining. I'm glad we can do this from the comfort of our warm homes or libraries, wherever we are. I'm in Chicago. I think all or most of you are in Iowa. My dog does not want to go outside Right? So that's how cold it is where we are. So I figured I would start with a book talk since I'm visiting with librarians and give you a quick book talk about Tumble, and then read a little bit, and then I'll show you some slides and talk a little bit about the inspiration for the story. So Tumble is the story of 12-year-old Adela Ramirez, who has a big decision to make. At the start of the book, her stepfather has made a potentially life-changing proposal, and this makes her start thinking about her father, who she has never met and whose identity she doesn't know. Her mom has kept him a secret from her for her whole life. So we join Addie and her best friend as they play detectives and try to uncover the identity of her father. And when they do, Addie learns all of these things about herself that she didn't know. The big one being that she comes from a family of luchadores, of professional wrestlers. So we follow Addie as she spends time with this newfound family and with her father, who is a wrestler who's trying to make a career comeback and who's trying to live up to his own father's legacy. It's a story about family and about identity and about community. It's also about kids developing a sense of agency and discovering that making big decisions can be tough, but can be empowering as well. And if you were here for Samira's talk earlier, Samira and Diane both talked about elders. I feel I am also an elder. I remember those after school specials. Gen X in the house. But I think one of the things that's always kind of in the back of my mind when I'm writing these middle grade books that I write is what kinds of stories I needed when I was a child. And so I think my role as an elder in the world of writing and libraries is to in some way try to create these stories that will open opportunities for discussion and conversations that sometimes can be difficult for families and for children and for adults. So that family is a big part of this story, and it's also a story about wrestling. So I thought I would read a little bit from the beginning of the book. And let's see. So this is from chapter 1, the very start of the story. I bit into a French fry, one of those tiny crunchy pieces that always make their way to the bottom of the pile, just as Apollo slammed a folding chair across the eagle's back. The small TV on the shelf behind the counter was muted, and while I couldn't hear the whack of metal against muscle, it startled me anyway. I flinched and jabbed myself with a shard of potato so hard that my eyes watered. Oi, Alex said. He peered up at the TV from the flat-top grill and let out a slow whistle. El Águila is getting his butt kicked again, eh, Adelita? Yeah, I said. I ran my tongue over the fresh cut on the roof of my mouth. Again. Maybe he'll win this one, right? Alex winked at me and cracked an egg into a bowl. I watched as he attacked the egg with a fork. Alex said the key to making a good scrambled egg was to keep the heat low and to beat the egg before pouring it into the pan. In general, I found the idea of eating eggs gross, but even I had to admit that Alex made a fine scrambled egg. Still, when he caught my eye and motioned to the runny glob he was cooking, I shook my head. Bacon grease popped and snapped on the grill as Apollo smacked the palm of his hand across the eagle's chest. A sizzle and the scrape of a spatula accompanied the eagle bouncing off the ropes, zipping across the ring and attempting a failed clothesline. My insides jumped as if the mat, which vibrated with each impact, were sitting in the middle of my stomach. On screen, the eagle showed no signs of winning this one. He struggled to get up, only to be met with the toe of Apollo's golden boot. He didn't stand a chance. Why does the eagle always have to lose? I asked. Because he's a jobber, Alex said, not looking up from the grill. What's a jobber? A jobber puts over the other wrestler, Alex explained, as the eagle tried to untangle himself from the ropes. Plain English, please. It means his job is to lose and make the other guy look good, Alex said. He's not a heel nor a face, not a bad guy and not a good guy, just a jobber, I finished. Unlike Apollo, who's definitely the good guy. He's the one you're supposed to want to win. But Apollo had enough people cheering for him already, so I found myself going for the masked luchador. Mom says someone has to root for the underdog. That someone is me. While the eagle slowly got up and rolled back into the ring, Apollo climbed to the top turnbuckle and waited like he was the bird of prey. I knew what was coming next. Wrestling might look like chaos, just a couple of people brawling, but it's a ballet, and anyone who was a fan would know that the final curtain was about to drop. Sure enough, when the eagle stood and turned, Apollo pushed off like his boots had springs, flying through the air in his signature closing move, the sunset. And that's lights out, Alex yelled, just like the ringside announcer did every time Apollo finished off an opponent. He slashed his spatula through the air for dramatic effect. Hey, I said with a frown, whose side are you on anyway? Yours, Adelita. He pointed at me with the spatula, always. I rolled my eyes. Alex was my stepfather. He was supposed to say mushy stuff like that. Alex lifted his Albuquerque Isotopes baseball cap, revealing the shiny bald spot that had expanded over the years, the area of hair on his head shrinking like a polar glacier. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand before pulling the cap on. Order up, he yelled, smashing the bell on the counter. On the TV screen, the eagle lay motionless in the ring. Get up, get up, get up. I thought the words so hard I was giving myself a headache. The referee dropped down next to the wrestlers and started the count. 1, he slapped his hand against the mat. Get up. 2, the crowd was counting along with him now. Get up. 3, the bell rang, signaling the end of the match. Apollo stood and pumped his fists in victory while the audience cheered and whistled in appreciation. In the grainy image, I could see the eagle's belly rise and fall with each heavy breath like a ball of unbaked dough. He rolled over on his side and the camera zoomed in on him. His spotted gold and brown mask was slightly twisted. Something about the way the mouth and eye holes didn't line up with his face made me feel sad for him. He looked like a helpless little kid who needed an adult to fix his costume. I wanted to reach through the TV and straighten him out. So that is the beginning of Addie's story. And what I thought I would do today is share. I'm going to share my slides. Let me see if I can do this like seamlessly and talk a little bit about the inspiration for Tumble. So I typically start a book with a few details that I know I want to turn into a story, and these can come from anywhere, including my own personal life. When I was in middle school, as Janae mentioned in the introduction, I was a huge wrestling fan. Yes, I did keep diaries in which I wrote about what happened on my favorite wrestling shows over the weekend. And I still have one of them here with me today. This is, if you can see my screen here, is my diary from when I was in like the 7th or 8th grade. And so when I started thinking about the next book that I would write, I knew that I wanted to write a book about wrestling, about this thing that I really loved as a kid. I wanted to revisit this childhood obsession. And then in thinking about my history with wrestling and as a fan of wrestling, and remembering the things that I loved about it, I remembered that a lot of wrestlers came from families, both actual biological families and made families, or found families. They wrestled as families. And so I knew that I wanted this to be a book that that kind of dove into that topic of what is a family, what makes a family. And so this is, if this picture on the screen is me with some friends. We'd gone to a wrestling event that came to our town, and we are holding up photos of our favorite wrestlers who are members of a family called the Von Erichs, who a lot of you may be familiar with now if you weren't before, because there's a movie about the family out now called The Iron Claw. So that was the first detail that I knew I wanted to be a part of this story. I wanted to write about families. I was also thinking about how Latino families specifically are often portrayed in children's books and in the media in general. They're often depicted as like these very kind of big, tight-knit families where everyone lives in the house. They've got a grandparent or grandparents living in the house. There's a lot of extended family. And that wasn't my experience growing up. And so a lot of times when you kind of see these portrayals and it doesn't match your own experience, it makes you feel like there's something wrong with you and with your experience. And so I wanted to write about family in a way that was not the way that I typically saw it in children's books or in other media. And so that is the first kind of building block for the story that became Tumble. And the more I thought about wrestling, I thought of wrestling as a type of story, and it reminded me of another type of story that I was really into when I was a kid. Wrestling has these kind of larger than life, almost superhero, super strong characters. There's good versus evil. there's a lot of family drama, and so it made me think about mythology. And so throughout the story, you will find references to mythology, not only Greek mythology, but also Mesoamerican mythology, so pre-Columbian mythology, because a lot of times I feel like kids learn about Greek mythology and Roman mythology. They're familiar with those, but they don't realize that there are other cultures around the world that have their own mythologies. So that became a second building block for the story. And then the third one was sort of a kind of coincidental thing that I came across on the internet when researching for a trip to New Mexico. I learned about this tumbleweed snowman that goes up in Albuquerque every year. I don't know if anyone here has ever seen it. I have never seen it in person, but I was just fascinated by this structure and the fact that they, the water department in Albuquerque takes these dangerous tumbleweeds and turns them into something kind of fun and cool. And so that detail determined the setting of the book. So Tumble is set in it's set in two fictional towns in New Mexico, and it also became kind of a central detail for one of the characters in the story. So I often talk about research when I do school visits. I talk a lot about the research that I do for books, because it's a very big part of my writing process. And in all of my stories, there is a library. There's typically a library scene where kids are trying to figure out a mystery or looking for some kind of information. So I do like to talk about research a lot. And research as part of the writing process informs, but it's also sometimes where I get ideas from. So for Tumble, I did a lot of research. I read a lot of books. I watched wrestling matches on the computer, because there are several scenes in which there are wrestling matches, and I wanted to kind of try to mix it up and make it true to what you would actually see if you were watching a match. It's also where I discovered this particular person, who is Irma Gonzalez. So Irma Gonzalez, the person that's on the left and on the right, was a professional wrestler from Mexico, and she started wrestling when she was a teenager and wrestled until she was into her maybe 50s, I believe. She wrestled as a tag team with her daughter. And I thought that character was just so fascinating. And she became kind of the inspiration for the grandmother that Addie meets when she meets this extended family of wrestlers. So wrestling matches, watching wrestling matches, reading books about wrestling were some of the types of research that I did for this story. I also created visuals. I've discovered through writing that I'm very visual, and so this is one of the things that I did for Tumble. So there is a wrestling ring in the yard of this family that Addie meets, and I was trying to kind of wrap my brain around what it would look like to have a wrestling ring in your own yard, and so I went out into my backyard and. After doing some research on the size of a standard wrestling ring, which is 20 by 20, I went into my backyard. I measured out the wrestling ring and then kind of filled in the lines on my phone so that I could see what it would look like to walk into somebody's backyard and see this full-size wrestling ring. And then the other type of research that I did was I delved into the archives and pulled out these dusty historical documents, namely my diaries from when I was a huge fan. I have not been a wrestling fan since I was a kid, so I kind of had to go back into that mindset and remember what it was like to be somebody who was very immersed in that world. And so here is my diary, which is the one I held up earlier. It's this little thing. So if you're those of my generation, remember these. I don't know, they still make these, but they're kind of like the fake leather bound with the little lock on the end here, with the little tiny metal key that gives you the illusion that you can actually keep your nosy siblings out of your diary. But my siblings would have just found recaps of the weekend's professional wrestling matches, because that's really all I wrote about in here. And you can see on the January 2nd, it was really funny to read back on these, because I've always thought of myself as like reading was my thing. It was the thing I loved most. But on January 1st, I mentioned that reading was my second favorite thing. And then on January 2nd, I went into what my very favorite thing to do was, which was watch wrestling. So that's the little excerpt that you see up on that on the right side there. And so it really is just a recap of wrestling. If you want to know what happened on July 9th, 1986, and whatever wrestling promotion, I could probably tell you because it's probably in one of these little tiny pages. So it's always kind of fun to talk about research and the different types of research that you can do when I'm visiting with kids, because sometimes I think kids tend to think of the library as a place where you do research with books or computers and kind of forget that there are other ways to do research, talking to people, talking to experts, using your own experiences as research. And I wanted to show you a little bit of a kind of background view into what the writing process looks like for me. So I am, like I said, I'm very visual. I'm also, I think maybe it comes from my zine making background, but I like to work with my hands. And so I typically print out drafts of books and I lay out the chapters. So you can see on the floor, I've got them all laid out. And I always think of it like those little, the little toys with the numbers that are out of order and there's one empty space and you have to kind of manipulate the numbers until you get them in order. That's sort of what it's like. I'm working things, like kind of moving things around until I have them in the order that I want them. I also physically cut and paste. You know, the kids know that Control X, Control V, but I have a pair of scissors and a roll of tape, and that is how I do my kind of manipulating of text. I cut things out where I don't need them or want them, and then move them around to where I think they will work better, hopefully. And there's my dog who makes an appearance in my first book. She's usually sticking around for the revision process. I wanted to show you some images of the cover because I think it's a very arresting cover, and I always like to kind of I think the cover illustrators get forgotten in the process of bookmaking, but I wanted to give a shout out to Steph C, who created the cover for the book. These are some of the earlier drafts of the cover. That's what the first draft of the cover looked like. We always kind of knew that we were going to want this face with the mask on the front. I also like the idea of the back cover looking like one of the old wrestling promotion posters. And so that's where the inspiration for the back cover came from. So you can see an example of that on the left here. And then on the right, the back cover without the text for the book. And then this is the draft of the cover once like the color palette was selected, and you can see that it looks pretty similar to the final cover, starting to look more like the final cover. And then there is the final cover of the book. And I just wanted to kind of conclude. I want to leave time for questions. I wanted to conclude by just saying that I'm really happy to have Tumble as this year's All Iowa Read selection for kids. The public library, and that's a picture of my very first public library in Miami where I grew up, behind the Winn-Dixie. It was really the central part of my life growing up. And so to have this book selected is just really, really special. And I am very grateful for this honor. I think that, like I mentioned earlier, I write stories that I think I would have enjoyed or would have needed as a child. And in Tumble, I tried to write a story that is one that balanced the serious and sad scenes, because there are some of those, with funny and exciting moments. There are some mysteries throughout that I think readers will be engaged with trying to solve, or trying to solve along with the protagonist. And so I'm just excited that kids throughout the state of Iowa will be reading it. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for reading, and thank you for sharing with your readers as well.
Thank you, Celia. That is a beautiful slide presentation, and I love the pictures of the cover, from the beginning to the final product is beautiful. And we'll open up for questions, and I'm sure people will add some questions into the chat. Looks like Abby said she definitely had a diary like that too.
Yes, we all did.
Definitely. Mine had a little lock. It had a little,
I lost the lock.
it had a like a letter lock where you had to spell out a name and then open
Ooh.
it. Looks like Bethany has a question. How would you convince kids that almost always stick to graphic novels that it's, quote, worth the hard work, unquote, to read your novel?
Oh my gosh, that is a tough question. And
Question.
Bethany, you're the public librarian, so I bet you've got an answer for that. That's a really good question. I love graphic novels. I'm a big graphic novel reader. That said, I'm a big reader in general. Gosh, I think I guess I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the cover. And number one, I think it's an arresting cover, and I think that alone will be the first thing that draws kids to it. It's a book that is about it's a book about wrestling, and even if you're, I think even if you're not into wrestling, I think it's something that hopefully will draw readers and will kind of keep them engaged. There are no graphics in it, so I can't say, but there are exciting wrestling scenes. I mean, they're fun scenes. I think there's a lot of the story is, Samira earlier had mentioned that there's always, the adults are always part of the story. And that is true for my books as well. I feel like the adults are always, they're not the center of the story, but they are very central to the story. But it is mostly a story about kids trying to find answers, first on their own, but also with the help of their community, and also just having fun, being kids, getting into some shenanigans, and hopefully that's something that draws. But I would love to, like, if people have thoughts on that, because that's such a good question, and it's a tough one. I think I said that I'm very visual, so I when I write, I always have, I have a feeling that I'm trying to capture. I have an image that I'm trying to capture. There's a mood that I'm trying to capture, and I hope that comes through in my writing, and that translates for kids who maybe gravitate toward graphic novels, even though you don't see the image. Hopefully, when they're reading it, they can kind of envision it and feel it, and what I was trying to do comes through. I hope that answers your question. I have to think that more. That's really good.
Let me see, there's some comments in the chat. Looks like Jay Finch said to Bethany, it has a graphic novel vibe, and I might ask a child what they like about graphic novels and see if there's something in connection. You can also ask for the book on audiobook as well, which that's a good point. That is a very good point. Thank you. Mark and Sarah asked, what are some of the other stories you see that kids in our schools and communities now just need to hear, or what do you have in mind next?
That's a great question. I think I mentioned this earlier, that this is that it's a story about it's about fun stuff. It's about wrestling, but it's also about this person who is kind of coming into her own and learning to make big decisions for herself. And that's something that I think I try to in some way weave into all of my stories, because when I was a kid, Samira talked about being an immigrant, child of immigrants. That's my experience as well. And I was not encouraged to ask questions or to challenge anything. So I felt very powerless as a kid, not just because I was a child of immigrants or a girl, but because just was not, my home environment was not one in which I was encouraged to, to question and to have a sense of power. And so I think those are the kinds of stories that kids really, especially now, that they just really need to read stories in which they realize that, as individuals, they have a voice, and they have the ability to act. and to at least to try, to try to change things in the world that they don't agree with, or in their own communities, or in their own lives.
I agree. Thank you. I have a question. What reactions or comments have you received from kids after they've read Tumble?
Kids are, so I do have a full-time job. So I'm not out there all year doing school visits. So I once in a while get to interact with kids at schools and libraries. I was in Texas in November for a huge event where Tumble was kind of central to it. It was the Tomas Rivera Mexican American Children's Book Award, and I think kids appreciate, and this is the case for my other books as well, especially The First Rule of Punk. I think they often appreciate seeing kids that look like them, in stories. And I don't mean just, that they're seeing brown characters or children of immigrants or Latinos, but that they're seeing kids who are dealing with like the same issues that they are, that they're kind of trying to figure out who they are, and that they can be a little off the beaten path and not have to be like everyone else, and that their family, like in the case of Tumble, that their family doesn't have to look like every family. And I think I always feel weird talking about my own books and like my book is so, but I think my books are fun, and I think kids enjoy like reading about something like wrestling that is that's fun. Like in this visit to in Texas, like the kids had all made capes and they had masks and they had like their wrestling names. And it's a way for them to kind of take on this alternate identity, and and be someone who they others don't know they are, or that kind of thing.
Awesome. Thank you. I was wondering, what was your favorite scene that you wrote in Tumble?
Oh, I think my favorite scene was the end, the last scene. I don't, so I'm in writing, they're usually, I'm sure there are other types of writers, but you often hear plotters and pantsers. So plotters are writers line, and then pantsers are writers who fly by the seat of their pants.
Your pants. Yep.
I'm a pantser. I think it's like the only thing I'm a pantser in my life, which is odd. But I'm a pantser in writing. And so I usually start, like I mentioned at the beginning, I have some idea, like I had these little nuggets, these seeds, and then I don't really know what the story is going to be. And I just kind of build around that. And I feel like I follow the protagonist. Like sometimes I don't know what's going to happen until she or they know what's happening. And so the last scene of the book was kind of like that. I had a sense of how I wanted it to end. But I wasn't, it was a surprise to have it end that way. And I enjoyed writing it. And I enjoyed it because it's a scene where almost all of the characters in the book are in it. And I always love writing scenes with like this huge cast of characters.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm just going to go back to the chat real quick because there was a couple of comments. Christine says, don't know much about wrestling, so looking forward to reading your book. And she said, thank you to the committees. And Bethany also said, thanks for your reply. We have it on our shelves, and I actually had a kid pick it up last week because they liked the cover, but then put it down because they thought it would be too hard to read all the words. I tried to encourage them that the best thing about a quote wordy unquote book is that you get to make a movie in your head of the story. I just thought I'd ask to see what you would say. And Carrie is saying that she loved hearing from each author on process and personal stories. And thank you for taking the time to be with us. And Mary is saying that she thinks that kids will love this book for book club. I'm excited to see what all the youth librarians come up with if they have a book club or if they have a different type of event at their library in conjunction with Tumble. I'm excited.
Yeah, it should be great. And Penguin does have a an educator's guide on their website. It's also linked to on my website. So they have a guide that has discussion questions, it has some activities. So that's something that that public libraries could definitely use. I know there are a number of school libraries that are using Tumble as one of their Battle of the Books. I'm meeting with one group on Friday, so
Oh.
few trivia questions to try to stump them with. But I'm excited to see what Iowa librarians do with Tumble. It should be fun, and please send photos or send messages if you want to share what you're working on and what your readers are working on. And I appreciate the questions about readers of graphic novels, because it's something to think about for sure when you're writing a story, and how to try to engage different types of readers.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Celia, for the time. We appreciate it. And we just can't wait to get started with all of our All Iowa Reads events. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so honored. Thank you to Iowa, and stay warm, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to try to stay warm and cozy here because it is cold. So, and especially in Chicago too. So thank you. So you have heard from all three authors today. And at your library, you can reserve a book discussion set of all three of these titles. So if you'd like to do so, contact your district LRT. Their contact information is on your screen. For Central and Southeast, contact Dory. For North Central and Northeast districts, contact Tricia. And for Northwest and Southwest districts, contact Amanda. All of their info is right there. You can reserve a book discussion set, perfect for all of your All Iowa Reads events. And next slide, Sam. And if you need more All Iowa Reads resources, please check out the All Iowa Reads webpage. We have resources related to the current titles. We have previous winners. We explain how All Iowa Reads works and more. So that is the link you can go to, and you can go to statelibraryofiowa.gov, and it'll lead you to there as well. And if you're looking for more books, please join us on Wednesday, February 20th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. for the Exploring the Shortlists webinar. This webinar will take an in-depth look at the shortlists for all three categories, and we'll have resources provided by the State Library that can help you plan and execute your own book discussions of the shortlisted titles if you'd like. So that's Wednesday, February 20th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And you can register on on Iowa Learns. And most importantly, please save the date. We are so excited to announce we are having virtual author visits in June as part of your summer reading activities and to celebrate All Iowa Reads. So on June 11th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m., Diane Wilson will discuss The Seed Keeper for adults. June 12th from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m., Celia will come back to discuss Tumble for the children's All Iowa Reads. And June 12th from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m., we will have Samira back to discuss Hollow Fires. This is a wonderful opportunity during summer. A lot of libraries I saw last year had virtual viewing parties for their children and their teens, and you could do this for adults as well. We'll have a similar format where a moderator will ask questions, and they will also take questions from patrons as well. For the children and teens, we will have a teen Iowa Student Poet Ambassador that will be interviewing Samira and Celia, and they will also take questions as well. Registration will open in mid-April, so please look out for all the information on that. And we also have some upcoming CE events. For Pop YS Live on February 7th, you can register for Prep for the Eclipse from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock p.m. Dr. Zachary Steer from Erickson Public Library and Dr. Sarah Nelson from NASA. They will be talking about how to prepare your library for Eclipse programming and resources and partnerships that you can utilize for the Eclipse. And that is coming up on Wednesday, February 7th, 1 to 2 o'clock p.m. Also, Thursday, January 25th, from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., we will have our ILOC conference, Iowa Libraries Online Conference. Please register on Iowa Learns for that. It's going to be a wonderful day of lots of sessions, lots of information. It's a great day. Please register for both events. Next slide, please, Sam. And with that said, we just want to say thank you so much for attending this year's All Iowa Reads author presentations. Thank you to Diane, to Celia, to Samira, and our colleague Helen Dagley, and our colleague Samantha Bowers. Thank you so much. Please let us know if you have any questions, and we hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Thank you, Janae. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.